This is Dueling Pistols, where history draws first and legends never die. No fluff, no filters, just raw stories of grit, blood, and legacy. Triggered by Black Flag.
After the Great Revival at Cane Ridge in Kentucky in 1801, it was reported, quote, Becca Bell is with child to one Brown. Kate Cummins also got careless and had a bastard. Patty McGuire has been whoring.
Patty straight up. Okay. Patty got thrown to the bus hard. The other ones, they slipped up. Patty whore.
Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Brian Call, and I'm joined by my brother, Brent Call. How are you, Brent?
I'm well. Thank you.
All right. Today's show, we're going to get a little deeper into the Daniel Boone story. We're in the thick of it with Boone, a biography written by Robert Morgan. Back to the book. We just heard from, in the last episode we did, that Daniel lost his son.
Mm-hmm. His youngest, right?
His oldest. I think it was his oldest, James.
Yeah.
Boone. I believe it was his oldest son. They were making their way to Kentucky. You know, he said goodbye to his mom, who was in her 70s, 80s. Mm-hmm. Like, I probably won't ever see you again. They were going to try to settle in Kentucky, and they had a whole ton of people. They took them a while to get going. They don't have wagons because there's no roads. They have horses and pack trains. You know, this is primitive, slow going. They didn't have enough supplies, so they sent some young boys back, including James Boone, to civilization, to the settlement areas to grab more supplies, more gear, more everything. So that's what they did. They hustled back. When the boys were only 3 miles from rejoining Boone and the entire, settlement of folks that were making their way to Kentucky, 15 Delaware Indians, some others mixed in there, stumbled on the boys and shot them in their beds in the dark and ended up torturing Boone's son James and his friend horribly. Adam, who was, I think his name was Adam, was a black slave who witnessed the whole thing. He hid in the bushes and, had escaped. The other slave froze in fear, and they cracked his skull. They found him like 5 miles further down with a tomahawk through the brain. So they took him with them for a while and then decided he wasn't worth keeping, I guess. And this caused the entire group to turn back to Kentucky. Or not back to Kentucky, turn back to the Yadkin, North Carolina, Virginia area.
They ran back east.
Yep, and this was a really dark time for Daniel and for the rest of his life. The loss of his son James was really hard on him. Where we left off, the last book, he was, sitting there saying, he had gone to see his son, dug him up, reburied him, and then heard Indians and snuck off through the woods, as legend has it. Let the horse bell ring as if it was just feeding, and then slipped off. So we're getting back into the book, resuming from that point on. As you could imagine, this causes some pretty angry resentment toward the Indians. Remember, they went and rounded up a bunch of the Indians who perpetrated the act, and they rounded those Indians up, and a couple of them, they had the tribes put them to death. And Big Jim got murdered or got killed.
But like 10 years later
or
like he
something.
basically got away with it.
And he was friends with the Boones, but he
at their house.
Participated in the torture of James. So, man, just some twisted times, twisted things. It causes some hostilities to get worse. So it says the rising violence between Indians and whites on the frontier culminated in a series of events that came to be called Lord Dunmore's War. Look that one up, Brent.
Dunmore?
Dunmore's.
Dunmore.
Dunmores. Fear and anger on both sides rose to a new pitch. Hunters in Kentucky shot Indians on sight, and Indians attacked whites without warning. As more and more surveyors poured into the great meadow, even the peaceful chiefs could not persuade the young warriors that the tide of settlement was not going to sweep over their hunting lands in Kentucky and reach their villages and tribal claims in Ohio.
Would you like to see the 4th Earl of Dunmore?
Sure. Nice.
Do you think he had a pose for that painting?
Photo, you know what I mean? Like
That head cocked over the shoulder, dude. He's posing like he's got that front leg out, dude. I see how the girls doing that on Instagram nowadays. He knows what he's doing. He's posing, showing some leg.
It's a pose, that's for sure.
It's a Scottish guy.
It's called Lord Dunmore's War. The colonies did not doubt that war was imminent. On January 25, 1774, a party of militia fired into a Shawnee encampment near Fort Pitt. In March, Lord Dunmore urged the colonies to prepare for war. A contemporary remembered, "Whoever saw an Indian in Kentucky saw an enemy." No questions were asked on either side, but from the muzzles of their rifles. Accounts of Henry Russell's murder was reiterated as evidence of the threat. Few of the published articles on the massacre mentioned James Boone by name. So Henry Russell, who was James's friend, I believe. So it was Henry Russell and James Boone were both tortured to death. Apparently Henry Russell had a lot more clout in the community at the time. It says the Boones were not as important as the Russells. So people would bring up Henry Russell, having been tortured to death by the Indians. That's all they ever needed to just attack any Indian they came across. That winter and spring, parties along the Ohio River were fired on and robbed by Shawnees. One group of Shawnees claimed Colonel Croghan, commander of Fort Pitt, had told them to kill all Virginians invading their territory and merely rob those from Pennsylvania. This is an indication of extreme rivalry between the different colonies for control of the Ohio Valley. They're saying to the Indians, okay, go ahead and kill these settlers, but just rob these other ones.
I wonder how well they executed that plan.
Well, he said, Colonel Croghan, commander of Fort Pitt, that's what they said. What he said, that means he's like, kill white people over here, but not these white people over here. Sounds like, among the white people, there was some rivalry as well. It says, Captain Russell, under orders from Colonel William Preston, sent a party of men over the mountains to the head of Powell's River on April 15 to be on the lookout for hostile Indians coming from the north. He ordered his men to act friendly until they found out the Indians' intentions, then hurry back to warn the settlers of any invading war party. Scattered fighting between Indians and whites became more frequent all up and down the frontier. Governor Dunmore sent out a warning to all the settlements that a state of war already existed between the Indian nations and the colonies. Chiefs like Cornstalk of the Shawnees, who had been urging peace, felt betrayed by this proclamation. In retrospect, it appears Dunmore may well have made things worse by exaggerating the danger. A classic way of increasing and maintaining one's power is to make people afraid. And the governor's greed for western lands may well have influenced his actions. Dunmore's alarms almost certainly heightened the tensions. It would seem that Dunmore wanted a war to further his own speculative plans for land claims in the West. Oh, politician.
Oh, that never goes south.
A politician, someone to run in and make everybody afraid and tell them that, it's funny how politicians come up with, they're telling you about all the danger. And then their solution is just give me your money, your allegiance, your time, your army service and your militia service and I'll protect you, The people who fall for that, it's like people that are ruled by fear. I hate them as much as I hate the people who take advantage of it. It's the fear that lets people, makes people be victims and cowards and go along with things that ultimately are so destructive. In this atmosphere of fear and apprehension, Governor Dunmore and Colonel Preston told William Russell, in his capacity as a colonial official, that the surveyors sent into Kentucky must be warned of the danger, and that he should employ 2 faithful woodsmen to repair to Kentucky to notify the surveyors of their dangers. Boone and Michael Stoner agreed to dash into Kentucky to let the surveying parties, which included Hancock Taylor, James Douglas, Isaac Height, and John Floyd, know of the Indian threat. Michael Stoner's only hesitation was that he didn't have a rifle.
My only hesitation. I'm unarmed, gentlemen.
Well, Mike, you'll have mine and I'll have another, Boone is reported to have said. You're the man for me.
You know what that reminds me of? Have you seen Enemy at the Gates?
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. You've seen it. We've talked about it before when the Russian army's like handing out one rifle to everyone, and he's like, "When the man in front goes down, pick up his rifle and shoot." It's one of my favorite lines. And they're just going along with it too. Like, okay.
Well, if you turn around, you get shot the other way. According to a deposition Boone made October 6, 1817, in St. Charles County, Missouri, he and Stoner crossed the Cumberland Gap. Colonel Andrew Lewis gave them directions. Lewis directed me to cross the Cumberland Mountains at what we now call the Sounding Gap, at an old war road that would convey me immediately on the waters of Big, or perhaps Little Sandy. Boone added that when he received the orders from Governor Dunmore, he was told to take the Kentucky and meander to its mouth as soon as he got over the Cumberland Mountains. The Sounding Gap is just a few miles from the headwaters of the Cumberland, Kentucky, and Big Sandy rivers. It is reported that Boone rented a horse for 62 days for his journey. Apparently on horseback, Boone and Stoner crossed the mountains on an old hunter's trace, struck the Kentucky River near its source, and followed it downstream. It would be hard to imagine a more dangerous journey than the two hunters had agreed to undertake. With Indians prowling the wilderness and attacking at random, and the exact location of the surveying parties unknown, the two woodsmen had to find about 24 men in 20 million to 30 million acres of woodland. All Boone knew was that some of the surveyors were in the bluegrass region near the Kentucky River, or maybe near the falls of the Ohio. But in fact, they could have been almost anywhere, and they could already have been killed as well. One of the ironies of this mission to warn the surveyors is that Floyd and his crews were claiming the best land in all of Kentucky for the officers and veterans back in Virginia. The colonial surveyors were preempting the very land that Boone and others like him yearned for. In that sense, he and Stoner undertook the dangerous expedition to warn their greatest rivals for the most desirable real estate in Kentucky. Dangerous as the mission was, and as important as its object, the foray sounds like something of a frolic, too. Boone and Stoner became great friends, and Boone enjoyed telling a story of Stoner being charged by a buffalo at a salt lick while Boone collapsed with laughter. Boone liked to imitate Stoner's thick German accent when he told the story. However much laughter they may have shared on the trip, they still knew they were in great danger, and slept in thickets and canebrakes, putting their campfires out as soon as meals were cooked, and while they ate, they sat back to back on the lookout for Indians.
I love that Boone and Stoner are friends. It was funny. I grew up and there was a family, and their last name was Stoner. They had 3 boys that I grew up with, and they were all super cool, but as you can imagine, they played sports, and all their shirts just said Stoner on the back.
Yeah, and I grew up with some Stoners and some Stones too.
Yeah, and I'm wondering because in the last episode it talks about how they changed their name from Steinel or Stein something to Stoner. I'm wondering if that's the case with them too,
or they were some sort of quarry rock. Rock layers or brick makers or that kind of thing. They dealt with stones.
Yeah, they've got the teeth for bricklayers.
It says, according to another deposition taken April 24th, 1794, he told Dunmore, Dunmore asked him to warn the surveyors, but also to mark some land for him and Hickman while he's there. Go rescue these guys, but also while you're there,
hey,
survey some land and get us some property.
While you're out, can you give me some water?
With danger gathering on all sides, Boone and his backers were still thinking of land claims and of the future. On the last of May or 1st of June 1774, Mr. James Hickman employed me to locate, enter, and direct the survey of 4,000 acres of land as soon as the time would admit of. And the 26th of June that same year, I was employed by Governor Dunmore to go out into that country and give the surveyors notice of the breaking out of the Indian War, and I took with me Michael Stoner. The fact that Boone and Stoner duly located and marked the 4,000 acres for Hickman on what was later called Hickman Creek near future Boonesboro, on land that turned out to have already been surveyed by James Douglas, does not lessen the oddness of this hurried and dangerous trip. Considering the area they had to cross, and with the surveying parties so scattered, there has been little agreement about which surveyors Boone and Stoner actually encountered. Boone and Stoner were probably not even sure how many surveyors they were supposed to warn. Besides their rifles and supplies, they must have carried a compass and a gunter's chain 60 feet long for the surveying. Luckily, Boone already knew much of Kentucky by heart. They probably carried their compass concealed except when it was actually in use. Day after day, the two traveled down the Kentucky River, keeping alert for signs of Indians as well as surveyors. They made small campfires, or none, and slept in a cave when they could find one, cane brakes when they couldn't, away from buffalo traces or warriors' trails. They fired their rifles only when necessary to procure game. They stopped and listened often for the sound of voices, for the chop of a marker's axe, for the telltale bark or bird call an Indian might make.
How you're not running that gunter's chain and being quiet. There's no way they're surveying this, and I don't see how they can stealthfully survey these lands.
Well, I don't think they're being that quiet, yeah.
Is this just a matter of get the job done as fast as you can? Is stealth kind of being tossed into the wind? That's my thought.
You got to think, okay, they're sitting there saying, Hickman and stuff, they're like, go in and rescue these people. Because they don't know how bad the hostilities have gotten. Mm-hmm. There's probably an element of them being truly concerned about those people who are doing the surveys. Mm-hmm. Some of them had probably, I'm sure, a financial connection to those surveys. Then you also had, we need a pretense to get someone in there to survey some land so that we can get it first. Because once you survey it and then you bring it back to Virginia and you get it certified, then it becomes yours in essence. And so the first to claim it gets it. So if you want to get out there and grab it and not get your head chopped off and all of that, then you can do that, come back and get it, and then you can get it granted to you by like the state of Virginia. This is going on. They just needed a reason in some sense to go in. There's all these treaties in place and you're not supposed to go over there because of the Indians. It's theirs and all of this, but it's like, well, go in and rescue those guys, but do it anyway. The book goes on to speculate how much rescuing was really being done versus how much just land surveying was being done in the name of rescuing people. And this is
it's more like land surveying, accidental saving people if they bump into them.
Well, there's different accounts, and the book is kind of walking us through it. The reason I think this is useful to understand is to kind of understand how the westward expansion was occurring at this time, and how it worked. They're under constant threat of being killed. You're moving into territory that belongs to, in their mind, Indians and their tribes and so forth. And the white people are pushing through after they've agreed to stay where they're at. And you have these city builders and entrepreneurs that have no intention of not expanding westward. None. Zero. Zilch. They're moving, and what are you going to do about it? Considering the area they had to cross, and with surveying parties so scattered, there has been little agreement about which surveyors Boone and Stoner actually encountered. Boone and Stoner were probably not even sure how many surveys they were supposed to warn. They're worried they're listening for the telltale bark or bird call an Indian might make. So they're wise to the Indians. Like, you hear a little bird sound, you're like, is that a bird? Or is that an Indian attack?
I always think when you're out hunting and hear an elk call, and you're like, that's a hunter.
For me, for much of its length, the Kentucky River runs in a gorge cut through limestone. Cliffs loom high over its waters. When Boone and Stoner stepped out on the bluffs to scout the valley ahead, they did not stay there long to be spotted by those paddling on the river or hiding in the thickets where meadows are open. They basically just, they hid. They stayed low. They laid low. They got their work done, but did it in untraveled paths, in areas where there's no trails. They stayed away from game trails where they might run into hunters. They laid low. It says the largest surveying party was led by John Floyd, a young man, only 24 years old, working for Colonel William Preston, surveyor for Fincastle County, Virginia. Educated, intelligent, mature beyond his years, Floyd, a native of Amherst County, Virginia, had true leadership ability. His dark, good looks revealed his heritage. One of his grandmothers had been half Catawba. A former schoolmaster, John Floyd, had been chosen by his close friend William Preston to survey the finest land in Kentucky on military warrants for veteran officers of the French and Indian War. Floating his party down the Ohio that spring, he had stopped to survey prime land in Western Virginia for Colonel George Washington, among others. Reaching the Bluegrass region in late spring, Floyd and his men had surveyed almost all the land around Elkhorn Creek and future Lexington by the time Boone and Stoner left for Kentucky on June 26. So what's this guy's name? Young guy. What is he, 26 years old? 24 years old? What's his name?
I didn't catch him.
It's kind of an important name. Just think of Dumb and Dumber.
Oh, shoot. What are the names from Dumb and Dumber?
John Floyd is the young man. He's 24, and he works for Fincastle County in Virginia. And he's educated, intelligent, mature, blah, 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 all these things. Because you have the Revolutionary War coming up. Mm-hmm. And there's certain men right now cutting their teeth in the wilderness that then later become, brave, prominent figures that end up helping America win their independence and so on, or have some critical, spot they play in world history and U.S. history. So anyway, John Floyd, he is kicking butt and he's getting real surveys. Like the kid is 24, the young man, 24. He knows what he's doing and he does a professional job and he's a true military type man, dialed, brave and so forth. And he's part Catawba. So his dark, good looks revealed his heritage. One of his grandmothers had been half Catawba. So his grandmother, not his direct mother. So he came from a white person and a half white, half Indian person. And then he was born out of that. So it's a generation or so back, but that's in his makeup there. I believe you had more intermarriage and interchildbirthing in these early frontier days and continued throughout that period of time, due to the promiscuity of, the folks and the times and all that kind of stuff. The desperateness of the times as well. So they're out there surveying. They don't know how bad the danger is going to be. They're really not supposed to encroach on Indian lands, but they do anyway. Now, and I hear this all the time where people say, the white people came and they stole the lands from the Indians, as if the Indians are one monolithic group. Which they were not. They were absolutely broken in. They attacked each other and rival tribes as viciously as they attacked the white folks that were there.
Even more common in some cases.
What I find ironic about the repainting world history as if, for example, it's just absolute rubbish that white people invented conquering and that white people invented taking over, lands and colonializing things. It's just
until Europe, they weren't even good at it.
Just absolute nonsense. Read a history book. Here you have this situation where these settlers are moving west and there's rules and they're breaking them and they're just going to move in. And it is a might is right situation. George Washington is over there surveying stuff, and they all have plans to westward expand and, take over areas. They fully expect to push the Indians out, or the Indians are going to assimilate. Those are the two options that they have for the native folks. I mean, make no bones about it. The native folks, prior to that, they took the lands from the native people who had it before them. Again, might is right. They wiped out entire tribes or pushed them out to another place. They took it over. I always think it's a pretty weird viewpoint to look at the situation and see it as one class. It's just like humans do it to humans. And in this case, if you're going to, for example, say that, what the white people did to the Lakota was unacceptable, then you have to look at what the Lakota did to the people before them, and then the people before them, and say that was also utterly unacceptable. And the fact is, that's just the world that you lived in that time. Fact is, we have the luxury today of judging the past. We have the luxury today of, in our comfort and in our modern civilization and all our technology, to sit here and judge those of the past as being unethical or immoral, when for them it was, you're damn right, I'm going to move in and try to take this, and you can deal with it. Because there is an element of survival and trying to prepare. There's greed among all the races and all human beings. Now, I will say that Native people had a different cultural view of owning land. That didn't make sense to them, but they did have the idea that you can't own the land, but you can
use the land.
You can be the bullies that keep others from accessing the animals on that land and the resources on that land. You absolutely don't own it. The idea that you'd square it off and keep a piece doesn't make sense. But the idea that from this river to this river is, Lakota land and Cherokee is over there, and if you come over here, we'll kill you. That's absolutely 100% in there, within the understood nature of their way of thinking. So it's not all that different in that sense, but there was a difference between living off the land as a hunter gatherer and cultivating the land as agriculture and farming and ranching. Totally different, domesticating animals and
looks very different.
Anyway, back to the book. It says one member of Floyd's crew, Thomas Hansen, kept a diary that spring and summer. And because he made detailed entries almost every day, we know a good deal about Floyd's activities during those momentous weeks, when much of the finest land of Kentucky was divided up for important people back in Virginia.
For the important people.
On Sunday, May 2nd, 1774, Hansen wrote, "We made a survey of this bottom for Patrick Henry. It contains 400 or 500 acres of very good land, including the fort and town. There is a sycamore tree 33 feet in circumference on this bottom. At no point in this journal does Hansen mention Boone and Stoner. Since Floyd split his group into 3 smaller parties of surveyors, it is possible Floyd encountered Boone and Stoner while Hansen was not around, but not likely. Because Floyd expressed deep gratitude to Boone later for his mission," so this is John Floyd, the 24-year-old young man who's a butt kicker, he said, because Floyd expressed a lot of gratitude toward Boone after the mission was over, this apparent lack of contact between Boone and Floyd remains part of the mystery hanging over the accounts of this hurried trip as the threat of war loomed over ever closer. So it's a detailed journal, but it doesn't include the mention of Boone and Stoner, yet Floyd expresses tremendous gratitude for Boone for taking that risk and coming and warning them. So it's like, okay, that just muddies the water for people trying to decide whether he was there for surveying or rescuing or whatever. Adding to the mystery of that summer is the later report of Robert McAfee, along with James Harrod and one of the earliest settlers in Kentucky, that Boone, on his way to the falls to warn surveyors of the danger from the Indians, had one lot laid off for himself in Harrodsburg. Many historians have assumed McAfee's testimony to be true and pictured Boone claiming a lot and building a cabin on it at Harrodsburg site while on his way with Stoner to the falls of the Ohio. But it is pretty clear that Harrod and his men had already left the region by the time Boone and Stoner could have arrived. McAfee apparently was confused by a lot Squire Boone staked out and claimed with his friend Evan Hinton at Harrodsburg in late 1775. They end up just claiming lots over lots. You're supposed to have this reliable
one for me, one for you.
they have this you're supposed to be able to look at the records and know, this has already been claimed, and this has already been claimed. Can you imagine? You just go out there and you square it off in the time that you're running back to get it certified, and someone else is then, who knows? It's just a mess. And then it's like this tree to that river to this tree. It's like it all kind of starts to look the same. On July 8th, Indians attacked some of Harrod's men, and 2, James Cowan and James Hamilton, were killed. Harrod and the rest packed up and headed back to the settlements, leaving more than 30 cabins deserted.
Wow.
They would not return until late the following winter. It took them until July 29 to reach the Clinch River. On the Elkhorn, Floyd had split his surveying party into 3 groups, one led by himself, and one by Hancock Taylor, and the third by James Douglas and Isaac Height.
They got to jump, bro. You never split up. You never split up. You seen Scooby-Doo? Nothing good happens when the group splits.
They agreed that they would all meet on July 24 at Herod's cabin south of the Kentucky River. When he reached the rendezvous point on that date, Floyd found only a note that said, "Alarmed by finding some people killed, we are gone down." It was then that Floyd decided they had done enough surveying, and he and his party headed toward the Clinch River settlements also. They did not go north toward the Ohio River because that was the direction the Indians would be coming from. And poling or paddling up the Ohio to Fort Pitt was very difficult. But having reached Kentucky by the Ohio River, Floyd did not know how to find Cumberland Gap to the south. Fearing for their lives, he and his men wandered for days in the mountains of eastern Kentucky and finally found their way to Pound Gap and crossed out of the Cumberland Mountains.
I'd be so mad if I was one of his men. What do you mean you don't know where the one gap to get out of this dang place is? You have one job, bro.
They came in from above, and now they want to go back, but they don't want to go back that way because that's where the Indians are, so they have to kind of find their way.
Oh, gotcha, to another
gap, and that was away from Indians. It is not clear from the records where Hancock Taylor and his company were surveying, but on July 27, Taylor Abraham Hempenstall and
they got great names back then.
Abraham
Boone.
Hempenstall and James Strother were traveling on the Kentucky River in a dugout canoe when they were attacked by Indians. Strother was killed and Taylor seriously wounded. Struggling to the bank, Taylor and Hempenstall found their companions, Willis Lee, John Willis, and John Green upstream, and the group began the long trek out of the wilderness. For 2 days, Taylor walked on his own in spite of his wounds. As he weakened with fever and infection, he was carried on the 3rd and 4th days. Late on August 1st, 1774, Taylor recognized that he was dying and, helped by John Green, completed and signed his surveys to make them official. After he was dead, the 4 men buried him where Taylor's Forks joins Silver Creek in future Madison County. Then they wrestled through thickets and mountain passes to find their way back to the settlements. It is almost certain that on the way, they were found by Boone and Stoner and led back to William Russell's home, Castlewood, on the Clinch River. James Douglas, Isaac Height, and their small party, when they found the 2 men of Herod's group killed, left the note for Floyd and located their canoes hidden on the Kentucky River. So, they meet up. They do all this land claiming and stuff. It says that some historians have suggested that Boone and Stoner's expedition was mostly useless, that the surveyors had already left Kentucky before the 2 messengers arrived. But Boone and Stoner returned to Castlewood the same day as the rest of Hancock Taylor's crew, one of Floyd's groups.
One of the 3 that split.
Mm-hmm. And it says their simultaneous arrival lends credence to Boone's claim that he conducted in the surveyors, or he brought them back. But it seems likely that when he and Stoner encountered them, they were probably already on their way home. Others have argued that Boone and Stoner were instrumental in leading the surveyors back to the Clinch River in safety. So, yeah. I mean, according to Floyd, who later thanked him for bringing in his party, it would seem that he was instrumental in some way. But, it was a long time ago and they don't have records. It's just word of mouth from person to person. By the time someone wanted to put this story together,
one random guy decided to keep a journal.
Yeah. Let's continue here. Boone and Stoner returned to Russell's Fort in the Clinch in August 1774, and having traveled 800 miles through the wilderness in exactly 2 months. Boone's willingness to undertake this dangerous mission and his successful completion of it gave him an enhanced status among leaders such as William Russell, William Preston, and John Floyd. From this point on, there seemed less doubt that he was an officer and a leader, not just a hired hand and a hunter. Meanwhile, a militia had been organized under the command of Captain Russell to join the fight against the Indians to the north. Floyd recommended that Boone be added to the company. Floyd was extremely grateful to Boone for having for his warning mission into Kentucky. And he wrote a letter to Colonel Preston. Captain Bledsoe says Boone has more influence than any man now disengaged, and you know what Boone has done for me by your kind directions, for which I love the man. While Boone had served in various capacities in the French and Indian War, his commission as lieutenant in the Virginia militia in the late summer of 74 was his first official appointment. Though he had often been looked upon as a leader and captain of scouting parties and hunting expeditions, his leadership had never been formalized. The son of Quakers had become a military man. He carried the document of the commission signed by Governor Dunmore with him for most of the rest of his life.
Really? Wow.
As a new lieutenant, Boone began the march north toward the defense of the Ohio Valley. But when he had gone about 100 miles, he was recalled by a messenger to return to the Clinch region where he was needed to organize the defenses there. He was put in charge of Moore's Fort on the Clinch River. A Mingo chief named Logan was attacking the mountain river settlements. Logan, whose Mingo name was Talgayita, is supposed to have said, the Indians is not angry, only myself. His family had been lured into a trap and killed at Yellow Creek on the Ohio in May. Daniel Greathouse had invited some Indians to the settlement, and after getting them all drunk, he shot every one. Included in the group were Logan's brother and his pregnant sister. The baby was cut out of the woman's womb and impaled on a stake. Out for revenge, Logan apparently wrongly blamed Michael Cressup for the massacre. Bands of Shawnees were roving through the region also, making random attacks. Most settlers abandoned their cabins and farms and gathered in forts along the river valleys. Rebecca Boone and her children sought the safety of Moore's Fort, south of Castlewood on the Clinch. With many settlers crowded into a small space because they were hiding in forts, the conditions quickly deteriorated. As in most wars, the greatest problem seemed to be boredom. The waiting, day after day, appalling conditions, poor facilities for sleeping, and tedium aggravated the fear of attack. One woman at Moore's Fort reported that the men would all go out and play at ball, and those not playing would lie down without their guns. We assume such lax security occurred while Boone was away on patrol or organizing defense at other forts. The story is told that the men became so careless while Boone was away that one day Rebecca and her daughters, Susanna and Jemima, and several other women decided to scare them. Loading a half-dozen guns, they slipped out the back of the fort and fired the rifles, then ran back into the fort and locked the gates. The men dashed to the stockade, but found themselves locked out and ran hither and thither in panic.
Wow. Oh, my gosh.
So they were playing outside the gates.
Uh-huh. This is a great joke.
So the women went out and shot guns to scare them all and locked them out of the gates.
Oh, real fun. Let's reverse those roles and see how they like it.
Some were in so great haste, they ran right through the pond. They were all exceeding mad. While the women laughed at them, the men threatened to whip the wives and daughters who had made fools of them. In the midst of such chaos, Boone had his work cut out for him.
Yeah, that's not the kind of behavior I want going on when I'm at war.
Chief Logan, with his Mingos and Shawnees, attacked Fort Blackmore. Logan dared the whites to come out of the fort to recover their blacks, whom he called their bearskins. They had captured some slaves that were out, like getting wood and stuff. But there was little the Indians could do against the fort. Without artillery to blow apart the gates and pickets, their only hope was starving those inside. That was not the kind of fighting that appealed to angry Indians. Logan's party killed a number of cattle and then moved on. They appeared a week later at Moore's Fort, a few miles away. 3 men had left the fort to check a pigeon trap several hundred yards beyond the walls. Shots were fired from the timber, and one of the men fell. Boone charged with the others out of the stockade to the rescue and saw an Indian in war paint rip the scalp from John Duncan's head. Before they could fire a shot, the Indians faded back into the woods. The next day, a child found an Indian war club left like a calling card beside the spring. Boone thought it might be that of a southern Indian, although the Cherokees had stayed out of the trouble for the most part. Mr. Boone has sent me the war club that was left. It is different from that left at Blackmore's. Mr. Boone thinks it is the Cherokees that is now annoying us. But it's possible, the book says, that Shawnees and Mingos were trying to set up their enemies, the Cherokees.
Tagging somebody else's name on
it. You know, leaving a weapon from a different tribe, like, it wasn't us, you know. Yeah. So it goes on. It's just more of this squabbling back and forth between the whites and the Indians. And it says, in early October, a guard outside Blackmore's fort saw an Indian lurking along the bank of the river. "Murder, murder," he shouted, and those inside quickly closed the door of the stockade. Trapped outside, the guard was shot by the Indians.
Why was he yelling murder? Help seems like a much better...
It just looks like they panicked, locked him out, and he got killed outside the gate.
In most situations, Brian, panic will kill you.
When a message reached Moore's fort several miles away, Captain Daniel Smith, Boone, and about 30 others rode to the aid of Blackmore's. They arrived late in the day and camped outside the walls of the stockade. During the night, several of the horses were stolen, and Boone tracked them for a distance into the hills but gave it up. It was the last incident in the region of the conflict known by the grand title Lord Dunmore's War. The Indians suffered only half the casualties their opponents did in this Dunmore's War. Cornstalk was known as a lover of peace, and it seems he and his native forces, though they had outperformed the whites, just got tired of fighting and agreed to a treaty. He also knew that Governor Dunmore, with another army in Ohio, was ready to march south to join the attack if they needed to. So it seemed like surrender was a good idea. Mm-hmm. But the way Boone performed during this time just enhanced his status and his reputation, apparently. This is written by Captain Daniel Smith. It says that Mr. Boone is an excellent woodsman. If that only would qualify him for the office, nobody would be more proper. Boone was given the promotion, and from Smith's phrasing, we get a sense of how Boone was viewed at the time by some of his upper-class associates. His integrity and leadership were recognized by those with power and influence, but officers such as Preston and Russell still viewed him first as a hunter and woodsman, not quite of their class or status. Yeah, he's a freaking hippie living in the mountains. Like, he is definitely not.
Yeah. He's not. I don't see Dana throwing on a powdered wig. You know what I mean?
No, yeah. He is, he's what he is, right? Like, they're not wrong, you know. He didn't want to be you. Either. So anyway, it continues. It says, this is interesting. Class, the manner of gentlemen, the air of authority, were very important in the 18th century, even in the frontier valleys. Boy, us Americans blew that up, didn't we? Like, we ain't like the British. We're not fans of class and the elites and gentlemen and all that kind of stuff. We pretty much got rid of that real quick.
We dished everything, including the accent. Like, we went hard. Because I was thinking about this today, because I was listening to some people from Australia, and I was like, and this guy is like, he's Japanese descendant.
Yeah.
And I was like, bro, you sound so British. Like, I would have thought you learned English over in England.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was just like, Americans dished that accent. Like, we dished it hard.
Well, you know, when you're living off the land like that, we got real wood smart, not book smart for quite a while before we brought it back. It says the air of authority, it was all important, even in the frontier valleys at this time. This is why, though, the people that came from England, which was Boone's father, educated in England, growing up in England, all that kind of stuff, then shipping to the wild, wild west, and each generation got more wild and less cultured and more like the native folks, more practical.
They went a little
It
native.
took survival, you know? Mm-hmm. And so the basic tenets of human nature you didn't have time for a lot of this pretentious stuff, given the fact that you might die tomorrow, you know, like there's just a different kind of world that they're living in. It says that Boone was a leader admired by those he led, but he was different. It is important to keep that difference in mind when considering his later troubled career in business and politics and militia companies. Though an acknowledged and even celebrated leader, Boone never did quite fit in with the ruling class in the new territories. He was too much the woodsman and hunter, even a, quote, white Indian.
Is that supposed to be like a slur or a compliment?
You can see that, though. Like, there are people who just have no interest in living your lifestyle, living in the cities, living away from nature. You know, I mean, I look at this and I'm like, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. He continues to just move up the chain of command and gets more and more support because they need him. He's the guy. He's the explorer, the woodsman, the person that keeps you alive, gets you through everything, right? He's sort of the hero on the battlefield. But that doesn't mean he maintained, like, once you're that kind of guy and you're not needed anymore, your utility,
there's no place for you. It's like soldiers coming back from war.
But it's also not entirely that Boone's a victim of people using him. It's just a natural consequence of the life you decide to live and the person you are, you know? Like, he just doesn't value money that much. He wants adventure. He doesn't fit in, but in some ways later at those upper levels of class, like, he's no George Washington, right? He's Boone. Totally different. And to his dying day, he stays true to the woodsman that he is. He's just not, he has his gifts and they're in the mountains, you know? So we're in the midst of this period of his life that we talked about before, where a lot of the things he's most famous for are happening. Right now, so far, we're kind of in that section of his life where he has struggled to get ahead. But you can see he has no money. You know, every turn he's lost every fortune he's tried to build. And I want to say this to entrepreneurs out there, that for many, including myself, I failed at a lot of things before I succeeded. I was almost 40 by the time late 30s, I started to have a little success on a few things. But man, 20s and 30s, early 30s to mid 30s, it was just one failure after the other. I stacked up a lot of losses, you know?
I like to think you got them out of the way.
But I still had fun. Yeah. And I still had good adventures along the way. I still experienced life. But my investments, my real estate deals, you know, my businesses I started, you know, they all, right when I was on the cusp of, you know, getting it done, you know, you have a housing crisis crash and a construction loan shut down and just things happen, right? I see that kind of with Boone. Like, you know, you haven't seen him win big, but he's gaining so much information, knowledge, and skill, and respect, and reputation, and connections, and networking, that things are going to culminate, and all of a sudden, where 20 and 30-year-old Boone failed, 40-year-old Boone wins huge over and over again, you know, or just in terms of his reputation as a famed individual. And Boone is one of those examples of someone with tremendous degrees of fame and no money to show for it. Kind of like an ex-athlete, you know, huge levels of fame, notorious fame, and at some point, huge amounts of wealth. Sometimes the richest people we knew, but now they're massively famous and don't have pennies, hardly. And they're still famous to this day, wildly famous. And yet they are poor in terms of, you know, where they ought to be, you know. They're never in poverty, but they're poor, you know, compared to where elite levels of wealth that their life had taken them to, you know. So I see Boone follow all those kind of paths, and in the end, he's not going to be an uber wealthy man as it relates to material things. But wow, what a life to have lived. Wealthy in life. Wealthy in lifestyle, wealthy in adventure. If you're going to battle the vicissitudes of life, the dangers and the sorrows, and encounter the chaos of life, you know, like I had mentioned before, the antidote to that being adventure isn't a bad antidote to undergo, to try out, to try to live out. And if anybody if anybody had an adventure, it was Boone. So anyway, we're going to get into the rest of this, moving ahead. Basically, there's some cool stories coming up. Boone, but we're going to get into where Boonesboro comes to be, which is just such a British name.
Boonesboro. Who lives in a borough?
It's like Boonesville, you know?
Yeah.
Like, who says that? Yeah, the British. The British do. Anyway, it's going to get cool. So stay tuned, folks. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. We appreciate that you listen, tune in each day, and support the show. We get to do this together. It's really cool. If you like the show, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment in the comment section of the videos. We love to hear from you there. And we just want to say thank you, appreciate you, and we'll catch you on the next one. All right, folks, I hope you're enjoying the Dueling Pistols podcast. If you like it, do us a favor and share it with a friend. Help us get this thing to grow a little bit bigger. Tell your dad, your mom, your brother, your sister, your buddy, your uncle.
Go to
your
contacts,
grandpa.
hit select all, send.
Just sell it. Just share it with a friend of yours, somebody, and help us spread the word about the show. Thanks for supporting us. We'll catch you on the next episode.